This is episode 7 with the special guest, Jenny Hrbacek. Welcome to My Kid Cures Cancer. My name is Ryan Sternagel, former regular guy turned dadcologist, cancer coach, and health advocate. Each week we'll talk to a new expert on a particular aspect of beating cancer or human optimization to bring you one step closer on your path to true health. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's dive into this valuable, life-saving information which you're not going to hear about in a mainstream hospital. Alright friends, I've got one question for you. Do the words wait and see sit well with you when it comes to cancer? If you think you might have cancer and a doctor tells you to wait and see and come back in a couple months, is that alright with you? Or if you've had some treatment or surgery and ask if it's going to come back and the answer is you'll just have to wait and see, is that an acceptable plan for you? If you could track cancer at the cellular level in far greater detail than you ever could hope to at the hospital, and not only that, but find out specific information about that cancer, including what its weaknesses are, is that information you might be interested in obtaining? Well, if so, you're in luck because there are such tests, and today's guest is the ultimate expert on all of them. Jenny Hrbacek, author, set out on a life-changing journey when she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2009. Today, she has launched a national campaign to change the way cancer is detected. She hosts the Cancer-Free University on www.cancerfreeareyousure.com and appears in Ty Bollinger's 2015 The Truth About Cancer, a Global Quest documentary series, the Cancer Answers Global Summit, and is a featured contributor to Doug Kaufman's TV show Know the Cause and a frequent guest on the Tony O'Donnell Show. She is the author of Cancer-Free Are You Sure? The book is the result of several years of expert research. It is the roadmap for how to detect cancer years before it is typically picked up by a standard screening test, such as a mammogram, PSA count, or PET scan. By the time a lump or bump is discovered, the cancer has most likely been growing for 7 to 10 years. She tells you where to get these tests, what they look for, what they cost, and how accurate they are. And I was really glad to be able to put this episode out sooner than later on the show. This is an area that's getting talked about more and more in the integrative world, but I still believe that it really needs to be hammered home to folks as something that's really a no-brainer, both in terms of prevention and monitoring existing cancers. Why wouldn't you want this information when there's so much you can do with it? And I also truly believe, as Jenny and I talk a bit about on the interview, that these have a lot of good potential to serve as a bridge between the integrative and conventional world, as a lot of the data is of direct benefit in making chemotherapy decisions as well. In this interview, Jenny talks about her own experience with cancer and the conventional route of going through chemotherapy and radical surgeries, getting told she was cancer-free, having a bad feeling, finding out about these tests, and soon after that the cancer was, in fact, alive and well in her body. We talk about some of the best tests that are detailed in her book, Cancer-Free Are You Sure?, for detecting cancer far before conventional oncology can find it and far after they think it's gone. We even talk about what you can do with the information that some of these tests provide to customize your protocol to what's actually going to work the best for you or your child. Jenny also lays out which of these tests might be covered by insurance, but even if it's not, why having this information is more crucial today than it ever has been. And we get into her online program, Cancer-Free University, where she gives you an expert interview on just about any subject you could ask for in integrative cancer treatment at your fingertips, which I personally am really excited about, and I'm actually featured in on that note, talking about some of our tips and tricks for making all of this information work in childhood cancer. That being said, I'm glad you stopped by My Kid Cures Cancer, where it's our goal to bring all sides of the discussion on how to heal cancer and be truly healthy to the same table to give you one place to tune into for the most well-rounded perspective possible. This is a show for people going through cancer, by people going through cancer, inspired by my wife Teddy and I's experience with childhood cancer, bringing our son Ryder from a stage 4 cancer diagnosis to the happy, healthy little boy he is today. If you aren't dealing with cancer and want to keep it that way, this show will likely be very helpful to you as well. We'll get to Jenny's interview momentarily, but before we do, just a few things to go over, starting with the almighty disclaimer that the information you hear on this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Today's question from our friends comes from Aline on the Facebook page, and it is, My Kid Cures Cancer, Ryan Sternagel. Do you use any type of sunscreen if your son is going to be under the sun for a long time? And Terry echoes that as well with, what type of sunscreen do you use for your little ones? And I might as well tell you that these questions were in response to a post we did with a picture of Ryder playing outside on the deck with his shirt off, along with a quote from a very comprehensive review study I found that goes a little something like this. Our data suggests that any improvement in vitamin D status will significantly affect expression of genes that have a wide variety of biologic functions of more than 160 pathways linked to cancer, autoimmune disorders, and cardiovascular disease. And the answer to the sunscreen question itself is that first and foremost, our use of it is actually very seldom. We try to get Ryder outside with his shirt off for short to moderate amounts of time as often as we can for the obvious health benefits, like in the quote I just read, but also to build up his tolerance so that he does get a bit of a tan and can take more and more sunlight, which in turn will be better and better for him. And on that note, FYI, the best way to make sure you do get a tan when you're in the sun is to not wear sunglasses. The sunlight in your eyes is what tells your body to produce the melanin, which forms the pigment in your skin. So while your friends might look cooler on the surface at the beach than you while wearing their sunglasses, you'll have the last laugh with a better tan. And even more important than a tan is lots of sunlight in your eyes during the day, and conversely, no white or blue light at night after the sun goes down is very important for proper mitochondrial function. And if you listened to last week's episode with Professor Seyfried, you know just how important the mitochondria is when it comes to cancer. And on avoiding white light at nighttime, you can find the special red LED bulbs and blue blocking sunglasses we use in the What We Use tab at mykidcurescancer.com in the anti-cancer home section. And do look often at that tab as we're always updating it, and it's a very good resource to get ideas to make sure you're covering all of your bases, which is what we try to be pretty big on around here. Above and beyond the strategic sun exposure, if we're going to be out for a really long period of time, the first choice is always just protective clothing or gear. The child carrier backpack that we love has a sweet little sunshade that pops up. We'll use big hats that are made for shade, those super light long sleeve shirts that are made for protection but are still really cool and breathable, and that sort of stuff. And finally, if we're just straight up at the pool for a long period of time and none of that is an option, a zinc or mineral-based sunscreen is the only way to go. The traditional sunscreen works in a way that it filters the UV, so you're getting one without the other. And while the kind that burns you is filtered out, if you're not getting them both together the way you're meant to, this is actually really bad for you, and ironically is just as likely to give you skin cancer as getting burned is. The mineral-based stuff just reflects all of it, so you're not getting any of the UV sources. But again, this is a last resort for us, as we do want to get as much of it as we can without going overboard. The most important thing with anything you're going to put on your skin is to make sure that it is toxin-free, and the best way to do that is the Skin Deep Guide at ewg.org, where they rate pretty much every skincare type product on the market in terms of safety of its ingredients. That's always our go-to when we're looking at something like that. And lastly, I can't mention the pool without saying that if you do go to a regular chlorine one, you're going to want to really rub in, well, a nice coating of coconut oil all over your body, and especially over your kids' bodies first, because before even thinking about the sunscreen, the oil is going to saturate your pores, and you won't absorb as much of the chlorine, which isn't just a bad thing when you drink it. It's possibly even worse when it's coming through your skin. A couple very exciting announcements real quick. The first is, as I record this, we are 4 days away from this podcast officially being 1 month old, and we are a few hundred downloads away from 5,000 downloads on iTunes in 1 month. Oh, and speaking of iTunes, I should also note that we have now finally been approved on Stitcher and added there. So if you're an Android phone user or you just like that platform better and have been wondering why we're not on there, trust me, we've been trying and now we finally are. On that note of feedback, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we have 2 new Patreon supporters for the week. And I don't know what to say about this except I'm incredibly humbled, and it means so much that you guys would think enough of what we're doing to help put some much needed wind in the sails. Kathleen Olson stepped up big time at the fighter level of $10 per month. Kathleen, I really can't thank you enough. And you even sent us some very nice Facebook messages with incredible health information that we will absolutely be incorporating into the game plan to boot, which was just very thought and sweet of you. So again, thank you so much, Kathleen, and I hope you don't mind, as the public thank you benefit is supposed to start at the fighter $10 level, but since it's the first month and this is so exciting, I also want to thank Paula, who stepped up at the Make a Difference level of $5 per month. Paula, that really does make a difference, and thank you so much as well. And now you can see both Kathleen and Paula's names right there on the support us page, which is at mykidcurescancer.com/crowd sponsor. Crowd sponsor is all one word, or you can just click the support our work tab at the top of the website to find out more. And I really wasn't kidding, Paula, that this really does make a difference. I was talking last week about how we have this awesome document put together called the 10 Things You Need to Know if your child has been diagnosed with cancer, that we really wanted to start sending people, but literally couldn't afford to hire someone to change the verbiage on our site to let people know it's available and click here and all that type of stuff. It's not like it's a super expensive change, but that's just where things are for us right now. And thanks to your help, we have been finally able to do that. So as of now, if you click on any article on the site, right on the top sidebar on the right, you'll see a nice big banner for the 10 things you need to know if your child has been diagnosed with cancer. Just click away, enter your address, and we will fire it off to you. And if you're really paying attention, you'll notice some other changes, making the site a little nicer to look at as a whole, a bit more user-friendly, and even more to come soon after this. I really mean it. This money goes right back into giving you guys better content and a better experience, so thank you. Your money is going to a very good cause. I, of course, want to mention the coaching program. If you're just getting started trying to figure all of this out, having someone get you pointed in the right direction and keep you from wasting your time on stuff that's not going to help is invaluable. There's just too much information floating around out there to try to get a good handle on everything in a hurry, and obviously the sooner you do, the better. Or if you've been at it a while now and just want a second set of eyes on everything you're doing. We'd like to think we're pretty good about ensuring we have all the bases covered and can pretty easily spot a hole, a room for improvement in a protocol and a lifestyle, etc. And of course, we've been figuring out how to make all of this work for kids for years now. So please consider learning from our experience and giving yourself the jumpstart you need. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can get it on the go on iTunes. And if you're listening to the podcast, be sure to check out the YouTube channel where we do post the videos of these interviews along with a whole lot more other interviews that are not on the podcast and videos just about how we make all this stuff work for children, for ourselves, and so forth. And of course, be sure to subscribe on both of those platforms to make sure you never miss a single piece of life-saving content. Perhaps most importantly, check out the article on mykidcurescancer.com associated with this podcast and all podcasts going forward for that matter. You'll find a full summary of what was discussed in the conversation along with links to any resources mentioned, but more importantly is the how this applies to childhood cancer section right at the top, where I talk about how whatever the guest said can be relatable to childhood cancer, which I would have given anything for early on. So do consider checking this out for sure, and you can find it at mykidcurescancer.com/Jenny-Hrbacek. and Hrbacek is spelled Hrbacek. Okay, with that, let's get to the interview with Jenny Hrbacek. This stuff is so crucial and such a solid way to really empower yourself with what you could call inside information on what is going on with and what to do about a cancer you're dealing with, or even better, one that isn't yet a major problem that you can turn around before it comes one. So let's get to it. Jenny, thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm quite well. It's been nice talking to you again a little before the call here, and seeing you once again from when we met at Best Answer for Cancer conference.
Yeah, that's becoming the public conference part of Best Answer for Cancer really grew this year. We had about 250 people show up. So it was incredible, the amount of speakers, and the people learned so much, and it was a joy to watch.
Yeah, no, that was I hadn't been to that before, but I got a ton out of it. That's a really neat. I always encourage people to go to these conferences if they're trying to take their understanding of healing cancer to the next level, because it's how many times do you get all those experts in one place?
Right. And that's an annual event where the doctors are coming for their physicians conference to get their medical, education hours that's required, by law by their different states. But then we pull them out a few of them one at a time, and they come over and they'll speak to the public. So to get that quality of, integrated physicians from around the world in one room is pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat. And I think the best takeaway I got from the conference was your book. It had been on my list for a long time, and I was excited to finally grab it, autographed and all. And no, it's a really neat thing you put together. How long has that been out now? I know you're on your fourth edition?
Yeah, it's been out about 2 years, and I've sold probably 7,000 copies, just me, myself, and I doing this on my own. And the reason the book came out of a need, because I'm kind of like you, Ryan, because Ryder got cancer and you learned all this incredible information. Well, I learned, my big thing was, oh my gosh, I have cancer. I feel fine. My labs are fine. Everything looks good, but I have this tumor, and it just started this cascade of finding out all this information. I just wanted to share it with people. I had no idea the expense and the time involvement, the commitment. I started to put it all on paper. But it's such a joy to get emails and calls and text messages and Facebook messages from people that say, you know what, I picked up your book, and it's, and thank you. So I didn't do it for thanks. I just want everyone to live and have a great quality of life. And cancer is something that no one needs to get, and it's absolutely manageable, as you have proven, if you get after it in the right way and you have it.
Yeah, and the earlier you can find it, the better. Which is why I think what you're doing, putting this information out all in one place, is so valuable. And did you say I didn't realize your book had only been out for 2 years, and you've already been through 4 revisions. That's pretty ambitious.
Well, and it got so thick, Ryan. This is it's an arena that's exploding, especially, with the circulating tumor cells. People don't even know what that is. And it started out when I first started writing the book back in 2009, when I was diagnosed with cancer. There were just 2 or 3 labs doing this type of testing. And now there's like an explosion, and there are all these companies that are even going to be jumping into the arena that are trying to get their tests perfected now. And it's a little bit gratifying to know that those couple of labs were doing it years ago. And so it truly can be done, because now other people are actually doing it. So I can explain more about that, but it's like we test people for diabetes, we test for high cholesterol, we test for inflammation. But we wait for you to get a tumor or discover a lump or bump before we tell you you've got, something. Because I believe all cancer is the cells are toxic and deficient, and so they can't live. And I think it's a self-survival mechanism of those cells. We're created to live, and so those cells, the phospholipid membrane sometimes gets thick, the oxygen can't get in, and they'll just start fermenting sugar. They just flip, and they're just wanting to survive. And if people know that they have a problem, there's so much that we can do to get rid of those toxicities and deficiencies.
It's interesting you mentioned the cell survival thing. I was at, I think the last conference I went to before Best Answer was I always have trouble remembering it, the Oncology Association of Naturopathic Practitioners conference.
Wow, I wanted to go to that, and I was busy filming, and I missed it.
I was like the only guy without an ND after my name on my name tag.
Hey, well, call me sometime. I'll go with you. I have an RN, but still, I don't have the MD or the ND either. So
yeah, no, it was pretty neat. But I heard a lecture there. He was talking about, it was Greg Nye, a naturopathic oncologist out of Portland, I believe. And he was talking about him and Stephanie Seneff, who is doing a lot of work on glyphosate. They've basically shown how the your body's sulfate production is kind of broken with all these pesticides and glyphosates and whatnot. And an interesting, you always hear about lactic acid, but I guess one of the other byproducts of a tumor is sulfate.
Right.
So, there's that. It's an interesting theory there about how, that could be another survival mechanism, just the body trying to, do whatever it can to make that sulfate. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And people don't even realize where we're getting all these toxins from. And I love the whole glyphosate topic, because if it's patented as a herbicide and an antibiotic, and we know antibiotics mess up our gut biome, and who wants to be eating a weed killer? But we are. So I'm glad they're doing that research. And I love Zach Bush too, because he's right there in the middle of it. He's great to listen to also on YouTube.
Yeah. I've actually, I've been aware of his product for a long time, the Restore product, but for what... I guess I never dug too deep into it. I just saw all those minerals on the label and said, oh, well, we have a mineral supplement. Right. This looks nice. Maybe I'll check it out sometime. But I actually just heard an interview for the first time the other day with him, and just all the research that goes into, what he's doing. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it is. Anybody can go onto YouTube and put in Zach Bush and listen. It's just incredible, the work he's doing. So there's, like you said, it's a full-time job to keep up with all this.
Yeah. Or you just don't get any sleep like me, but
That's bad. I'm going to have to text you every once in a while and say, how many hours did you sleep last night? I'll hold you accountable. It's my one
health vice, but I take extra moringa or something like that. So.
Okay, good.
Anyway, I want to talk about your book and the tests and whatnot, but I always love hearing, people's, like you said, people's story of how they got into this. It's usually not just out of a general interest in cancer. It's usually a personal need, and I know you're no different. So what in a few minutes, what was Jenny's cancer story? What have you been through, Jenny?
Well, Jenny's cancer story was back in 2009. I just went for my normal yearly checkup at the doctor, and she goes, "Oh, I think you have a cyst in your breast." And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I've heard of other people having that. That's odd. Well, it turned out not to be a cyst, and it turned out to be breast cancer. And the monumental moment, which was my aha moment, was when I was at the oncologist, and they're telling me I have cancer. And I go to the doctor every year. My labs are fine. My CBC, my liver enzymes, everything looks good. My cholesterol, I'm not diabetic. Everything looks perfect, but yet I have cancer. And so I asked him, I said, well, how could this be? How long have I had this? And Ryan, I expected them to say, oh, well, you got it in the last year. because when you go to the doctor and you get a physical and they tell you you're fine.
You were fine the year before, yeah.
You're fine, right. And they said, oh, no, you've probably had this 7 to 10 years. And I went, what? 7 to 10 years I've had this? And I go to the doctor every year and no one can tell me that I've had this. And now I require chemotherapy and potentially radiation, and I need this radical surgery. It just didn't make sense to me. I mean, look what you and I are just Skyping. We're talking. We have these little tiny microprocessors. We have so many things going on that um, it didn't make sense to me that we couldn't find cancer. So I just that kind of stuck in the back of my head, and I just kind of kept going with it. And then I found out, wow, we can find out we have cancer. So, um,
Hey,
I
Jenny,
guess,
just out of curiosity, did you?
yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. Your
Uh,
video went down. I didn't know if you did that or if it was
oh,
just a
no,
connection
somebody
thing.
was calling me. That's why. I
Oh.
guess what I did too. I think I needed to send it to voicemail. My phone rings today. But anyway, Ryan, so they told me I had cancer. I didn't know about integrative. I didn't do what you did for Ryder for myself because I'm a nurse and I was trained with all those doctors that I went to see. And I ended up doing chemotherapy. I ended up having terrible radical 6 surgeries actually. And then I went to a breast cancer support group, and because I thought, oh, I need to go to the support group because that's part of the process. You have all the treatment and then they give you a card for a support group. So I went, and as the people were telling their stories in the support group, more than half of the women in that room had had a recurrence, and they were all told they were cancer free. And they'd gone back to their life because I watched them at the first meeting. They were eating, they had a tray of cookies, they had pasta, and some fried chicken was the dinner. And I was like, okay, this is not good. And I got to thinking, if all these people have had a recurrence and they were told they were cancer free, I better get with the game here and figure out what's going on, because what makes me any different than them. So I ended up going to Dallas. I left Houston because I thought, well, the people here are telling me I'm cancer free. They told me eat cupcakes, exercise, take a multivitamin, you're fine. You don't have cancer. So I went to Dallas, and that's how I found out about Research Genetic Cancer Center, which I'm going over there tomorrow to the lab to actually tour this world-class lab. It's evidently huge, and they've been doing work with finding cancer in the blood, not with the tumor. And they've been able to tell people for many, many years, I believe almost 10 years now, if you have cancer just by taking some blood out of your arm. If you have kidney cancer, they can tell you that. They can find those cells in the blood. And so all of a sudden, it made sense to me. So why don't we just imagine that someone has a colon cancer? They have a tumor in their colon. The doctor goes in and removes the colon, removes the tumor, gets clean surgical margins. They put the colon back together, and they tell the person, hey, we got it all. Bye-bye. Go have a nice life. Go play golf. And then, months or years later, you're on the golf team with this buddy, and all of a sudden he's not there. And you go, what happened to Bill or Bob? And they say, oh, didn't you hear his colon cancer's back? But it's in the lung now, or it's in the liver. Well, how did that happen if they got all of that tumor? What happens is a tumor has blood supply going in and out, and a few stem cells, about 2% of a tumor is cancer stem cells, and those are the ones that can reproduce. And those just went and hid somewhere, and this guy didn't do the things like taking healing and drinking moringa and getting on basically high plant-based diet, or maybe got in a stressful situation, and that colon cancer came back. So it just set me off on a mission to let people know that please don't let your guard down, because if you've had cancer, you want to make sure that you stay cancer-free the rest of your life, because it is really manageable. But people don't have a motivation to make change. And who wants to eat salads all the time? I'm in Texas. Everybody wants barbecue and chicken fried steak. So and that's what my friends eat. They eat, we eat a lot of fajitas and cheese enchiladas here, and that's not necessarily the best anti-cancer diet.
No, but it seems like there's always like a healthy way to make pretty much anything that you were used to before, and it's usually even better.
You have to know. And my point was, in the end, was, you mean I could have had one of these tests in my book 3 or 4 years ago, and I could have found that I had cancer before you guys could even find this lump or bump on a PET scan, because a tumor needs to be about half a centimeter for it to show up on a scan. So basically, by the time we're telling people they've had cancer, most adults have had it for quite a few years, and my point is, if you can go without surgery and the body can take care of it, that's your best option. Because I truly believe cancer is easily beatable. It takes a lot of work. I mean, look what you've done with Ryder. It's just amazing. But people don't know they have a problem. And so I'm really excited about some of the testing that's come out in the last, since I was diagnosed in 2009. But people have to know to ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, excuse me, if you have to find out you have cancer, would you rather find out at stage 1 or even like a pre-stage 1, or would you find out at stage 4, which if you had to
Right.
choose?
Right. And I think the psychology of it is people think they don't want to know they have cancer, but 1.7 million people are going to be diagnosed this year. 1 out of 2 men, out of 2.5 women. And it's kind of hard to avoid. Our air is toxic, our water, we've got chemicals, we've got pharmaceuticals in the water. It's really hard to protect yourself, even with all the EMFs. So we have to be, we've got to be more diligent. I don't know. People will say, Jenny, no one wants to know they have cancer. I'm like, yeah, but believe me, if I could have known when it was not even visible on a PET scan or when it was 2 millimeters, I would have been so thankful instead of it being 1.9 centimeters. I mean, unfortunately, we can't get away from it. The statistics are just going up, and it is what it is. So that's what I'm doing, telling people, ask your doctor for one of these tests, find out if you have it early. Another point of discussion, Ryan, is that people think when you have cancer, you got to run down and get chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. And with this new paradigm, if we find cancer before you qualify for that, we could change the way the world, detects cancer and how we treat it, because people won't qualify for surgery. There's nothing yet to take out, but they can get on a lot of these integrative therapies and let their, detox and fix nutrient deficiencies, increase, oxygenation, and give the body a chance to stop it before you do require all that.
Yeah, that is. I never thought of that before, but yeah, I know even if they do find it conventionally early enough, a lot of
Right.
times their recommendation will be nothing. Just see how it turns out, and a lot of these things go away on their own, that sort of thing. So.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess speaking of conventional testing, I know you speak to that a bit in the book. What is the landscape right now as far as what you are offered if you suspect you have cancer and you go to a mainstream hospital? How are they attempting to diagnose cancer right now, and maybe what are some of the shortfalls or areas for improvement in
Right.
what they're
Right.
doing?
Well, the problem is right now you have to have a pretty good case of cancer to even qualify for the doctor to order the test, because they'll usually just, oh, well, you don't feel good. Well, let's just check, standard labs. And those may very well come back absolutely normal.
Yeah.
I'll give the example for breast cancer. They check a CA 15-3 and another lab called a CA 27-29. Mine were absolutely within normal range at the time that I had a 1.9 centimeter tumor. So you've got to have a mass that's suspected, because a lot of times your labs will be normal to even get the doctor to order an ultrasound, then a biopsy, which, where they stick a needle into it, which that information is very important. But we have a whole new way of doing biopsies. We don't have to stick a needle into a tumor and disturb it. And, we cause an injury, and then the body goes, ooh, there's an injury here. And it sends out cells to start repairing that. And those cells can escape into the bloodstream. And so now we can do what's called a liquid biopsy, where it's actually a blood test, and they can get the same cancer cells out of the blood, because every tumor, think about it, it has to receive nutrition. It has to get oxygen. It's got to get its sugar content, because those tumors have a little network. It's called angiogenesis. And as things go in, cells get swept away. And there's a test out that's called Oncoblot that they're actually retooling their lab right now. And they've told me they'll be up and going here in a couple of weeks again, because they've had to kind of cut back while they expanded. But they can test for something in the blood called ENOX2. And the ENOX2 protein is only produced on the surface of cancer cells. So if you get a blood test and it's positive for ENOX2, Oncoblot can actually tell you the site of origin. They can tell you if it's liver, if it's lung, if it's colon, years before you would ever even have a tumor show up, where your doctor would order that PET scan. So let me go back to the testing you're going to get. So maybe you'll get an ultrasound, maybe you'll get a biopsy, and then they'll do a PET scan, which we all know is It's radioactive glucose. They inject it, and then the cancer cells have lots of insulin receptors. That PET scan will light up. The cancer cells will light up. And by the time you get that, you have to have a lot of cancer to absorb a lot of glucose for it to light up about half a centimeter. But if people knew to ask for an Enox 2 test, that's a simple test, and it's just, I call it a liquid biopsy. There's a brand new test that's also Enox 2, but it is Enox 2 quantitative. And I spoke to Dr. Rick Davis. Actually, he texted me yesterday, and they are offering that test now. And the website will be up any day, and it's quicklab.com. And it's a blood test, and it tests for Enox 2, and it's going to tell you how much Enox 2 you have in the blood. And the cool thing about that is that test is only $175. It would be maybe $250 by the time your doctor adds in, his office expense. But they will be able to tell you how much Enox 2 you have. And Enox 2 breaks down, the half-life is like every 24 hours. So you could literally test once a month, and the number will go down proportionate to the amount of cancer that's going on in your body. So a person could see, is what I'm doing working, or is it not working? Because then we might need to shift, because as we know, what works for one person doesn't always work for everyone. So, there are alternatives for a PET scan. There's alternatives for the biopsy. If you can find a doctor that will work with a liquid biopsy.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned, how hard it is to even get a diagnosis in the conventional medical system. We actually, Ryder had a huge lump sticking out of his back, and but he had normal markers or labs or whatever it is they ran, and they took an X-ray and didn't see anything, and told us to come back in 6 weeks. Luckily, that lasted a weekend, and we're like, no, something's going on here. But
and they say cancer cells double in size every 90 days. So once you've got a pretty big tumor, all of a sudden it can be, that waiting time can really be a problem. I can't wait for the day when we all go to the doctor and we get one of these screening tests that I've got in my book, and you just ask for it, you get it. And then you can find out that you've got a problem so much earlier. And, I don't want anyone to get over-treated, but I want people to know, hey, got a little problem here. Just like if your blood sugar was high, you would, get on a low-carb diet, and you can reduce. I know people who get off their insulin in 90 days with just doing a low-carb diet. So we're just not giving the body a chance. We're letting it get really bad before we find it, and then we need radical therapies.
So the Oncoblot test you mentioned, it's testing for the Enox 2 protein. Is that, it sounds like it tests for a whole lot of cancer. Does it?
Right.
Are there types of cancer that it does not test for that we should be aware of?
Brain cancers, anything on the other side of the blood-brain barrier, they have a hard time with, but on their website, they list all of the different types of cancer that it can find. And that test is kind of expensive. It's like $825. And I'm hoping when they reopen here to the general public, they're trying to get the cost down. But the Enox 2 quantitative, that test is going to be around $200. So that's much less. Now, another option for people who have had cancer or they have the diagnosis is a test called Biocept. And it's actually covered by insurance. And it will tell you how much cancer, because they're going to actually measure from the blood the amount of circulating tumor DNA and tumor cells. And then they give you the genomic markers on those cells also. And I just can't believe people haven't figured out that, wow, we have information on me having cancer, but I don't even know where the tumor is because I don't have a lump or bump yet. It's a whole new way of dealing with cancer. And I think that's part of the pushback from allopathic or traditional conventional medicine is they don't know what to do with people who they find it without the lump or bump. They don't know what you know.
Yeah, well, you'd think with I know with like Biocept, for instance, they're, like you said, they're testing those genomic markers, and that is kind of, conventional oncology, the kind of stuff that they look for. So you would, I don't know, you'd think that they would be more pleased to have that information to work with. You know what why there's, I don't know, why do you think that is, that they're not just jumping all over this?
I think because it's just standard of care. It's, they've got the NCCN protocols, National Cancer Comprehensive Network, and they know if you have small lung cell cancer, these are the drugs that are the option. If you have colon cancer, these are the drugs that are the option. And the doctors just pull out their chart, and they follow. If you have this, then you follow. It's like a little graph, and it takes you right to how much drug to give. And I think it's more work to look at those markers, and then the test will actually tell you what drug therapies are effective for those different markers. Now, the test I got was by Research Genetic Cancer Center, and they offer a plethora of tests, but they also do the genomic testing. But the doctors who order that test will usually look at something, and they'll put the natural substance to go with that instead of the chemotherapy, because there are a lot of crossovers. Instead of actually getting a drug therapy, you can do something different. And the Research Genetic Cancer Center gives you the blood test. They'll tell you the amount of circulating cells that you have in your blood, and you can monitor that as a benchmark from year to year to make sure it doesn't jump up at some point, because if it does, guess what? You got to dig in deeper, and you got some work to do. But they also, instead of just giving you a genomic profile, they will take your cancer cells, and they have a world patent on a process where they can take those cancer cells and put them in a medium, and within like 24 to 48 hours, they have millions and billions of your cancer cells. So they've replicated them, and then they will actually put those cancer cells in contact with curcumin, with artemisinin, with and even chemotherapies. So you see in the lab if you have a response to high dose vitamin C, because those infusions can be expensive, and if your cancer cells have a 5% response to that, you might want to spend your money on something that's more effective. I know back when my count was 14.2, which was huge, when I was told I was cancer free, I had that much cancer circulating in my blood through this test.
What's a normal range?
Normal is 0.
Oh, 0. Perfect.
Yeah. One, the lab should not be able to pull cancer cells out of your blood. They should not be replicating. They should your immune system should go gobble them up, and you should not have to, you shouldn't have any number. But, every year I have a little number. So I constantly am watching it. I'm constantly changing up my protocol, doing different things, because I want to live a long time, and it's actually not that difficult. But I know I have the issue, so I'm constantly, doing different things. Some of the things that Ryder does, and I know your family will always do this because cancer's out there. 1 out of 2 men, 1 out of 2.5 women. We've got to learn. We've got to re-educate ourselves. But I love the Research Genetic Cancer Center test because it gives you the natural substances also, and the drugs, because some people need drugs, and sometimes people do need to get a surgery to get that tumor burden down, so that then they can deal with what's left and build up the immune system. If you've got a huge tumor, sometimes it's a lot for the body to digest that. So I'm not against surgery, but sometimes you do need to debulk and then do some of the things like you guys did to get rid of it if it's possible.
Yeah. And that's actually a message that I try to preach as well, is we're not necessarily dogmatic against any of the, the conventional stuff. Because I mean,
Right.
when we did catch Ryder's tumor, it was inside of his spine and growing out of his spine, and literally everyone was amazed he wasn't paralyzed. It was that bad. So that dose of chemo, it did shrink it down pretty quick.
Right.
And that's, I'm sure there's probably a natural agent that we would have been able to find that would have done the same thing, but would we have, found that magic combination of stuff in time?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
In your case, you did the right thing. You didn't have time to mess around. And there are absolutely times when you need even a full dose of chemo to get that tumor burden down. But that's the whole point of my book, is don't wait for it to get that bad. Because I'm telling you, we can find cancer years before the lump or bump. And the research out there, it's hard to figure out how to do it. That's why I wrote the book and tell people these are the tests. This is how much it costs. This is what website to go to. Ask your doctor for it. And if your doctor won't give it to you, fire him. Find another one. You can do that. Um, you know, I wish what I had done instead of doing full dose chemotherapies, I would have done the insulin potentiation therapy, because I had the RGCC test. It told me which drugs would be the most effective. It'll tell you a percentage, like 89% for this drug, 92% for this drug, and then maybe it might be 36% for another drug. So, and actually one of the drugs they gave me really wasn't effective for the cancer that I had, because I had a combination of two different drugs. But I wish that I had known and had that test. I could have gone to my doctor and said, here are my sensitivities for my particular cancer. Because nowadays cancer is not monocultural. It used to be everybody who had colon cancer responded to this. The cells were all the same. And now they can pull different cancer cells out of a tumor or out of the blood, and from one cell to the next, they can have very different sensitivity markers, because there's so many toxins and so many different things that are causing these mutations. It's amazing that we're all doing as well as we are living, in this world today.
Yeah, no, I think somebody put it at the conference that it was, cancer is kind of the perfect storm. That there's just so much coming at us these days that it's not like it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago or something like that. It's
Right.
So we have to be that much more on guard and knowing what our options are. As far as the the chemo conventional sensitivity testing, it does seem like it could be sort of a bridge to to bringing these two worlds together, which I would certainly like to see more of. And
Right.
so it sounds like I think it's very valuable work you're doing.
Yeah. Well, the doctors now, sometimes they'll order a foundation medicine or a Biocept, which only gives them the genomic markers, which is a potential probability of what might work. Just because you have this marker and they give you this drug, it's not guaranteed with genomic. It's just a predicted value that this would be a good therapy for you. So it's certainly better than just shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
If you know what markers are on your cells, it makes sense. I don't know why anyone would allow themselves to be given chemotherapy without insisting on that, at least a genomic test at the very least. Or another really cool thing, if someone's going to go in and have a tumor removed, is you can actually send a piece of the tumor to the Nagurni Cancer Institute. It used to be called Rational Therapeutics, but it's Dr. Robert Nagurni, and you have to pre-prepare for this. And you have a kit, and you have your surgeon put a little bit of the living tumor tissue in the specimen packaging, the way it's, the instructions are, and you overnight that tissue to the lab, and they will test your living tumor tissue with all the different drugs, which is incredible. I love reading the stories on his website about people who have had pancreatic cancer or different types of cancer, and they've not responded to all the different drugs, and finally they'll get a tissue sample, they'll send it over to him, he'll test it, he'll identify exactly what will work, and then all of a sudden the body responds because you're giving the correct thing. But you have to know to ask for that test. So I talk about that one in my book. But most people say, oh man, if I had known about that, I could have done that. But this is a whole new educational area here.
So you mentioned insurance starting to cover some of these tests. I think Biocept specifically.
Right.
Are there any others besides Biocept that's covered? Is that the main one right now? And then
Foundation Medicine, they're paying for some of their things. Let me get my little list out here. CA Profile is getting some insurance coverage. That's through American Metabolic Laboratories. You just have to check your policy.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell people, don't worry about that test being covered by insurance, because that test can make a big difference in your outcome.
No, you're gonna pay a whole lot more without the information. Yeah.
Right. And people think, oh, if it's not covered by insurance, I'm not going to do it. But there are just certain things that you need to do if at all possible. You just don't go in and say, oh, I have a coupon for a free pair of shoes, so just give me any size. No, you have your foot measured, right? And the width and the arch, and you get the right foot. You get the right shoe for your foot. So it's kind of the same thing. If you do end up with a cancer diagnosis, and you're doing whatever therapy, even if you're doing the low dose chemotherapy with the insulin, which is used to ride that chemo right into the cell, get the proper testing so you don't get the one size fits all. There's nothing worse than trying to put your foot in a shoe that doesn't fit.
And on the insurance note, it as it stands right now, is it basically a kind of a prognosis slash monitoring type thing that it might be covered for? Or can you
Yes,
just say, I wonder if I have cancer, will you
right.
pay for this test for me?
Right. Now, the two tests that I would say to do that for, you could do an RGCC, which it's about, you have to pay in euros, so it's about $600 just to get their onco count to see if you have any cells.
Yeah.
Or the onco blot test, which is oncoblotlabs.com. Or you can do the new test, which is going to be about $200, Enox 2 quantitative through QuickLab. And hopefully by the time people listen to this, Dr. Davis will have his website up. But you can just ask your doctor to order test kits, and you can just check to make sure you don't have any Enox 2 protein.
Yeah.
It's a little warning sign. It breaks my heart to see people that, fear comes over you, as you know. If you get, especially look how big Ryder's tumor was. I mean, and he's a little body, and oh my goodness, you know what it is. You just want it out by the first person who can take it out. And that's always not the best idea. But if you don't have good information, you can't make informed decisions. And if you can find it real early, it just takes all those other things off the board, because the doctor won't schedule you a surgery. He won't schedule chemotherapy, but you can go to Best Answer for Cancer's website. You can go to beatcancer.org. You can, and just go on there and find an integrated physician. Go in and say, hey, I've got some Enox 2, or hey, I've got some circulating tumor cells in my blood. There's no known tumor. Put me on I call it the preventative cancer program. And then let's retest in 6 months and see if we can make that go away. That's how I would love to see us handling cancer. It would be a rare occasion when someone actually waits for the lump or bump. But right now, that's what we do. We wait for the lump or bump.
Yeah. Speaking of Ryder, and in the context of these alternative tests, do you know if any of these labs have much experience with, are they looking at many childhood cancers? Are they finding that they're producing the same proteins? Are they doing much, the long-term testing on them? Because it's just, when you deal with childhood cancer, you come to find out that there's a lot of differences between just and a lot of this nuanced stuff. So I'd be curious to hear if you've heard of any of those guys doing much with any of the childhood stuff.
Unfortunately, childhood cancer is just kind of coming up, and as you know, most parents of a child with the childhood cancer don't even get into integrative because it's not an option. I've heard Ty Bollinger talk about people where they actually took the child and put the child in protective custody to do these, allopathic conventional therapies. So unless it's a parent like you that knows to ask for this extra stuff, it's not going to happen with kids. But I know all those labs will take a child's blood, and they can tell you the same markers that are, they can identify those markers just like they do on anyone of any age. It's a tough situation.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, integrative is that's an option with childhood cancer, because you just can't turn down the conventional treatment altogether.
Right.
But we were certainly doing a whole lot of stuff on the side.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, just for anyone listening, I think what I am going to do for neuroblastoma, and what anyone else with any of these other rare cancers might, childhood cancers might do is, I'm going to go through your book and take a look at what protein each of them are testing for, and then cross-reference those in PubMed. So I'm going to type in, neuroblastoma in one search field, and the Enox 2 protein in another search field, and see what comes up. And I'm basically going to go through every test in your book and see what I get. And I would encourage anyone that's not sure what test is going to work for them to, if it's not, already spelled out just by reading the book, to do that. I think that would be a good idea for most folks.
Yes. Sorry, now my picture went out again. Anyway, so, and it sounds bad that we're talking about cancer testing, but let me tell you, it's much better than the alternative, and the outcomes are so much easier to do when you can find it really early. Just look how much work you guys had to do with this huge tumor. If you had known the day he was born that there was some cancer cells, I mean, your whole process probably would have been a little different, but then we wouldn't have you here you'd have to do all this research. Amazing. There aren't many people, you're the only person I know speaking out about childhood cancer. Because, like we said, it's really hard for people to even know that integrative exists because they just get swooped up in the fear and in the appointment schedule and in the therapy, and it's actually just standard of care.
Yeah. No, it's the standard can be quite overwhelming on its own, let alone trying to figure all this other stuff out on the side. That's for sure.
Right.
We should probably get wrapping up pretty soon, but I do want to mention your new project, which is
sure.
Cancer-Free University, which is pretty neat from what I've seen. Do you want to tell everyone what's going on there?
Oh, goodness, what I did, there's so many things out, like I'm in The Truth About Cancer. There's so many incredible podcasts and web things going out. But since I did the book on testing, I actually know people at the labs. I know someone at Biocept. I know the CEO, Mike Knoll. I know Dr. Ray Hammond with the Research Genetic Cancer Center. I know Dr. Emil Shindal with the CA Profile, and on and on. And so I actually got with the scientists. Even I got with David Taggart, who's an incredible scientist with Oncoblot Labs. And I got them on screen, and I talked to them about the test. How can this test help someone? Who would this test be good for? Tell me what you're doing, how this can play a beneficial role. So I actually take you into the laboratories. I mean, I've got the people on. Then I went further and I interviewed physicians about each integrative therapy, which I'm building on. Every month there will be new content. But if you want to know about artesunate, which is showing a lot of promise as a cancer therapy. If you want to know about IV silver, if you want to know about IV vitamin C, I actually get a doctor on that's being very successful with that therapy. And we spend like 45 minutes, maybe even an hour discussing the topic. So, because it's scary to walk away from conventional therapy. It's scary to say, oh, I'm not going to do it. My doctor says in the white coat down at the big hospital. But I'm going to do something else. So I'm just kind of like throwing people a little lifesaver so that they can feel confident in what they're doing. And I actually have 60 different people on, but I have doctors all over the country. So you can actually take a peek into what they do at their clinic that's integrative, and then people have more options. And I took it further. So I have testing. I have all the different cancer therapies. I explain what low-dose chemotherapy is. And then I went into prevention and lifestyle things. I've got Howard Strauss with Gerson on. I've got Sherry Calbaum with the Juice Lady. These people are just phenomenal. I've got Travis Christofferson on the mitochondrial dysfunction and the production of ATP. So it's a growing body of evidence online, on demand. We're actually right now putting it on CD. So I want to tell people that if they want to sign up, it's www.cancerfreeuniversity.com, and I'll be adding interviews monthly. But if they put MKCC50 for My Kid Cures Cancer, they'll get a discount, and that'll help support your work.
Oh, wow. Well, that's mighty kind of you, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all this is a group effort. As you know, unfortunately, you're in the club now.
And were you telling me before the call that there's some sort of like kind of monthly option people can go for as well?
Yeah, it's going to be like $29 a month. So you just go on and click that payment option.
Okay.
To get an interview with one of these doctors can cost you anywhere from $250 to $500 just to find out what they're doing. And we've spent a lot of money producing this, putting it on CD online for you. You can watch it at 2 o'clock in the morning if you want. And there's actually 4 questions at the end of each interview so you can test your knowledge. Because as we know, knowledge is power, and what we think we know about cancer is not really correct. We need to change our paradigm. We need to think that we don't have to wait for the lump or bump. The body can heal. We have to understand the body is toxic and deficient, so we can deal with those things. And I just make cancer simple. If you have the time just to sit, I mean, it could take a long time to watch all those interviews, but all the information is there from experts, even scientists at the labs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going through just everything you have on there, and I hope to maybe have something resembling that body of work in 10 years of doing this podcast. And you have it all right there, and it's really invaluable. I'm looking forward to going through as much of it as I can myself, just for
Yeah.
because. But if I had something like that early on, that would have been huge, because that's the thing with when you're dealing with these cancer diagnoses and trying to get into all this alternative stuff is you can spend days, weeks, months just clicking around to all these different
Right.
websites, and
Right.
it's
It's
a
a
lot of
lot.
work.
I'm making it simple, making it easy for people. But the thing is, they have to first realize that there's value in that information, because let me tell you, there's life-saving information in what you're doing and what I've done in Cancer Free University. And I'm just the moderator. It's the work of these incredible physicians around the country that are stepping outside of the box. They realize that conventional isn't always having the best outcome, and they're having huge success rates. Dr. James Forsyth has a 73% success rate for the 5-year survival rate for people with stage 4 cancer. And that's huge. That is huge. The normal rate is 2% for people with stage 4 cancer. So these guys and gals are doing amazing work, and I just bring them right into your home where you can hear and go, oh, I like that doctor, I'm going to Florida. I like this doctor, I'm going to Reno. I like this doctor, I'm going to Dallas. And you can take it a step further, and it kind of gives you a starting point.
Yeah, no, that's great. I can't remember whether I asked you this in our little 10-minute interview we did at
Uh-huh.
Best Answer for Cancer conference, but there's something that I ask everyone that comes on to this show, and if I did ask you, maybe we'll compare your answers and see if they're the same.
Okay.
But it would be, it's if you had to boil down everything you know into 3 golden rules on how to stay healthy and disease free, or become healthy and disease free, I suppose. But what would those 3 rules be?
Okay. First of all, you have to sweat. Every day you have to sweat. We have to detox, and we all go from air conditioned to air conditioned, and you've got to find time to sweat out those toxins, because cancer is a disease of toxicity. I'd say we have to supplement. Our food supply is nutrient void. It's incredibly important to take some good supplements. And you have a great resource there on my Kid Cures Cancer website. I've got a whole chapter on it in my book. Don't think that you can get by without taking vitamin D. You've got to have it. Okay, so I said sweat, take supplements, and then your diet is huge. You've got to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I actually do eat some meat and fish, but I try and eat really clean, organic, grass-fed, because your diet's huge. But it's all about supporting the cells. And then if I could have a 4, I would say find an integrative guy and have someone give you a little test every 5 years just to make sure something doesn't slip up on you. So, because like you said, if you do those things, you're going to have a much better chance of never getting that diagnosis.
Yeah, and just having someone to work with that knows a whole lot more than you do, rather than trying to figure out everything yourself, is
Right.
it's worth
Don't,
it.
it's too much work. Believe me, it's too much work.
Yeah. If I could go back and change something, about our path, it would have been just, we paid for a ton of consultations, obviously, but I
Right.
probably would have paid for even more, just because it saves a
Right.
lot of time.
Right. And I've got those consultations on video for you.
There you
So,
go. There you go. Um, I forget. Do you want to give everyone just all of your if they want to know about all things Jenny Hrbacek one more time?
Okay.
Where would that be?
Sure. My website is www.cancerfreeareyousure.com, and it's just all spelled out. And then www.cancerfreeuniversity is for Cancer Free University. And there's actually a link to contact me through my website. So people send me emails, and I try and respond to those as soon as I can. And so that's about it. And I'll also post where I'm speaking at. I'll be out in Orlando, the ACIM, I believe it's ACIM Connect is that website. They're having a big cancer and chronic disease conference out in November in the Orlando area. So people can check that out and come and listen and learn. It's for the public.
Very good. Very good. Well, I might have to try to make my way out there myself.
Absolutely. It would be great.
Do you would you like to take us out, Jenny, with any final thought or sentiment that you'd like to share with anyone going through cancer right now, either for themselves or a loved one?
Right. I would just want to encourage everyone that cancer is not a death sentence. You absolutely can heal. You just have to know what to do. Don't try and navigate this on your own. There are experts out there that can help you. Just listen to this podcast. There's some resources that you can get to those experts because cancer is absolutely beatable, and we're trying to make it simple for you. Don't overcomplicate it, and just take the fear out of the equation, because I think when you get knowledge and you feel like you're doing something, you have a whole new sense of purpose. Wouldn't you say that? Even with once you got educated with writer, you feel confident in what you're doing.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of those catch-22s where I wish it had never happened, but there's so much good that has come out of it. I just I did my little about this podcast episode recently, and that's kind of what I said is if you can step back and take a look at everything that's wrong with your life and replace it with everything that's gonna do you good, that's not such a bad thing.
Absolutely. The scriptures say we are to have life and have it abundantly, and we can do that. We just have to do a little bit of work.
Beautiful. Jenny Hrbacek, thank you so much for coming on.
You are so welcome, and I look forward to talking to you and seeing you soon.
Bye, Jenny. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right. I hope if you hadn't heard of all the tests that are available, this has pointed you in a very good direction. If you've known about them for a while now and have yet to pull the trigger, hopefully this puts you over the edge. Either way, Jenny's book, Cancer Free Are You Sure, is definitely the ultimate guide to figuring out which one is right for you. And also do check out her Cancer Free University. If you like this podcast, it's like that, but only hours and hours and hours at your fingertips on very specific topics. I'll put both of those resources in the resources section of this article on the site, which you can find at mykidcurescancer.com/Jenny-Hrbacek. And again, Hrbacek is spelled Hrbacek. And don't forget, that article's got my summary of the entire interview, my thoughts on the interview, tying it into all the other information that there is out there to consider, and our thoughts on how the interview applies to childhood cancer, which I've certainly got a lot to say about this one, so definitely check that out. And please, if you do find the information valuable, share it out on your social media platform of choice to help us get this information out to those who need it. Again, if you like what we're doing here, think about buying us that cup of coffee once a month. I promise you will see the direct benefit. That is Patreon, of course, that I'm talking about, which you can find out on the Support Our Work tab at mykidcurescancer.com. Lord willing, we'll be back next week with Travis Christofferson, where we'll be essentially following up on our conversation with Professor Seyfried and diving even deeper into the metabolic aspect of cancer. You certainly will not want to miss it. Music was provided by the Fat Rat and Tasty Network, and all editing was done by my beautiful bride, Teddy. That's all for today. I'm Ryan Sternagel. We are My Kid Cures Cancer, and if you are going through cancer right now, the most important thing you can do is keep going. God bless and Godspeed.